Okay. So, so now we'll be starting the topic depreciation, which is your unit number 3. And as you can see, so these points, this whole PDF is from the AS10 property, plant and equipment. I have taken the depreciation part from that standard only on the from the notes provided by Institute of Chartered Accountant of India. So first of all, what is depreciation? So depreciation is the monetary value of an asset which decreases over time due to the use, wear and tear, or obsolescence, and this decrease is measured as depreciation. So when we have an asset, so it is used, we use that asset for our operations, business operations and other purposes. So when we use the asset, the value of that asset decreases with time or due to wear and tear or with the because of any other factors. So that decrease in value is known as depreciation. Now, as per AS10, that is property, plant and equipment, the guidelines regarding depreciations are given here. Each part of an item of property, plant and equipment with a cost that is significant in relation to the cost of the item should be depreciated separately. So here they are saying every part of the asset with the cost that is significant and in relation to the total cost of the item should be depreciated separately. Every part should be we should charge depreciation on every part separately. Next point is an enterprise allocates the amount initially recognized in respect of an item of property, plant and equipment to its significant parts and depreciates each such part separately. For example, it may be appropriate to depreciate separately the airframe and engines of an aircraft, whether owned or subject to a finance lease. So here they are saying an enterprise is allocating the amount to recognize the item of property, plant and equipment and also to the significant parts, and they are depreciating the significant parts of that item of property, plant and equipment separately. For example, if there is an aircraft, so the airframe, the engines, whether they are owned or subject to finance lease, are depreciated separately. Now, next is a significant part of an item of property, plant, and equipment may have a useful life and a depreciation method that are the same as the useful life and the depreciation method of another significant part of the same item. So the significant part of an item which is included in property, plant and equipment may have a useful life and a depreciation method that are same as the useful life and depreciation method of another significant part of the same item. So and one item can have many significant parts, and such parts may be grouped together in determining the depreciation charge. Next is, to the extent that an enterprise depreciates separately some parts of an item of property, plant and equipment. Now you can see they are again and again mentioning the word property, plant and equipment. We are no more using the word fixed assets. Now, as per accounting standard 10, we are again and again using the term property, plant and equipment because the depreciation is charged on property, plant and equipment, all the three aspects. So it also depreciates separately the remainder of the item. So some parts of the item are depreciated together and some parts are separately, the remainder parts are depreciated separately. So जो important parts हैं, जो significant parts हैं, हम उनको एक group बना के एक साथ depreciation charge कर रहे हैं. और जो रिमाइंडर पार्ट है उस पर अलग से डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज हो रही है, लेकिन डेप्रिसिएशन सब पे चार्ज होगी बिकॉज वियर एंड टीयर यूज हम पूरे प्लांट और इक्विपमेंट या प्रॉपर्टी का कर रहे हैं. ओके, द रिमाइंडर कंसिस्ट ऑफ द पार्ट्स ऑफ द आइटम दैट आर इंडिविजुअली नॉन सिग्निफिकेंट. अब जब हम यहाँ पे बोल रहे हैं रिमाइंडर, तो रिमाइंडर मीन्स दोज पार्ट्स विच आर नॉट सिग्निफिकेंट, okay, which are not that important. If an enterprise has varying expectations for these parts, approximation techniques may be necessary to depreciate the remainder in a manner that faithfully represents the consumption pattern and useful life of its part. So they are saying that if the enterprise is not sure or have varying expectations, so they can use the approximation techniques to depreciate the remainder. Next point is, an enterprise may choose to depreciate separately the parts of an item that do not have a cost that is significant in relation to the total cost of the item. So there can be some parts of a machine or equipment which are not that significant. So in that relation, they are saying you can charge those depreciation separately. Okay, which are not that significant to the total cost. They are very minor. They have a very minor cost. So they can be depreciated separately altogether. Next is the depreciation charge for each period should be recognized in the statement of profit and loss unless it is included in the carrying amount of another asset. So जब आप अपनी इनकम स्टेटमेंट बनाते हैं, प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस अकाउंट बनाते हैं, तो वहां पे आप डेबिट साइड पे हमेशा डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज दिखाते हैं. इफ देयर इज डेप्रिसिएशन, अगर आपने कोई डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज की है तो वो आप हमेशा वहां पे शो करते हैं, राइट? सो वो ये बोल रहे हैं कि इट शुड बी रिकॉग्नाइज इन द स्टेटमेंट ऑफ प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस unless it is included in the carrying amount of another asset. अब carrying amount, what is carrying amount? Carrying amount क्या होता है? Carrying amount is the amount at which the asset is placed in the balance sheet. जिस वैल्यू पे एसेट पिछले ईयर के डेटा से वो इस ईयर के डेटा में, इस ईयर की बैलेंस शीट में आ रहा है, दैट अमाउंट इज द कैरिंग अमाउंट. ओके, सो अगर आपने उसमें इंक्लूड नहीं करी है डेप्रिसिएशन, तो आप अलग से उसको प्रॉफिट एंड लॉस में शो करेंगे एज अ चार्ज. नेक्स्ट इज द डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज फॉर अ पीरियड इज यूजुअली रिकॉग्नाइज्ड in the statement of profit and loss. This is very clear. However, sometimes the future economic benefits embodied in an asset are absorbed in producing other assets. In this case, the depreciation charge constitutes part of the cost of the other asset and is included in its carrying amount. अब इसको समझते हैं with an example. For example, the depreciation of manufacturing plant and equipment is included in the cost of conversion of inventories. हमने क्या करा? जो depreciation है manufacturing plant and equipment की, उसको include कर दिया in the cost of conversion of inventories as per AS2, accounting standard 2. Similarly, the depreciation of property, plant and equipment used for development activities may be included in the cost of an intangible asset recognized in accordance with AS26. So AS26 is for intangible assets, provides guidelines for intangible assets, and AS2 provides guidelines about the valuation of inventories. So plant and equipment used for development activities can be included in the cost of intangible asset, which is recognized in under accounting standard 26. So depreciation amount and the depreciation both are included. Next we have the depreciable amount of an asset should be allocated on a systematic basis over its useful life. हम कभी भी ऐसा नहीं करते हैं कि हम एक ही साल में या सिर्फ 5 साल में उसकी डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज करते हैं, उसके बाद नहीं. हम ये देखते हैं कि उस एसेट की यूजफुल लाइफ कितनी है, और ओवर दैट यूजफुल लाइफ वी स्प्रेड द अमाउंट ऑफ डेप्रिसिएशन. जब तक उसकी यूजफुल लाइफ खत्म नहीं हो जाती तब तक हम डेप्रिसिएशन चार्ज करते रहते हैं. इट इज स्प्रेड, द डेप्रिसिएशन amount is spread throughout the useful life of an asset. Next point, the residual value and the useful life of an asset should be reviewed at least at each final financial year end. So वो क्या बोल रहे हैं यहाँ पे? They are saying कि जो residual value है और जो यूजफुल लाइफ है किसी भी एसेट की, इट शुड बी रिव्यूड अगेन एंड अगेन एट लीस्ट एट ईच फाइनेंशियल ईयर एंड. हर फाइनेंशियल ईयर के एंड पे वी नीड टू रिव्यू द रेसिडुअल वैल्यू एंड द यूजफुल लाइफ ऑफ एन एसेट. And if the expectations differ from previous estimates, the changes should be accounted for as a change in accounting estimate. So as per accounting standard 5, हमें क्या करना है? अगर हमें लगता है हर फाइनेंशियल ईयर के बाद हमें रिव्यू करनी है रेसिडुअल वैल्यू और यूजफुल लाइफ ऑफ एन एसेट, और अगर हमें ये लगता है कि हमारे जो एस्टिमेट्स हैं दे आर डिफरिंग फ्रॉम द प्रीवियस एस्टिमेट्स, तो हमें वो इंफॉर्मेशन हमें डिस्क्लोज करनी है. दिट शुड बी अकाउंटेड फॉर एज अ चार्ज इन एन फाइनेंशियल एस्टिमेट. As per accounting standard 5, net profit or loss for the period, prior period items and changes in accounting policies. This is the whole concept. This is the whole accounting standard 5. Okay. I hope this is clear to everyone till here. In case you feel any doubt or if there is any problem, you can ask. Okay. Next is depreciation is recognized even if the fair value of asset exceeds its carrying amount. So fair value of an asset is the value at which the asset can be sold in the market. That is the fair value. Okay. So depreciation is recognized even if the fair value of asset, that is the market price of an asset, exceeds its carrying amount, the amount at which it is placed in the balance sheet, as long as the asset's residual value does not exceed its carrying amount. So हमें depreciation तब तक charge करते रहना है जब तक asset की residual value exceed नहीं करती उसके carrying amount. Okay. Repair and maintenance of an asset do not negate the need to depreciate it. अगर repair और maintenance हो रही है एक asset पे तो इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हम उसको depreciate नहीं करेंगे. Then also we'll charge the depreciation. Next is the depreciable amount of an asset is determined after deducting its residual value. What is residual value? Can anyone answer? What is residual value of an asset? It would be great if you can answer. So in accounting, residual value is another name for salvage value. That is the remaining value of an asset after it has been fully depreciated or after deteriorating beyond further use. So it is the basic value after the useful life of the asset, remaining value. Okay. So the residual value of an asset may increase to an amount equal to or greater than its carrying amount. And if it does, depreciation charge of the asset is 0 until and unless its residual value subsequently decreases to an amount below its carrying amount. So they are saying residual value जो है asset की, that may increase to an amount equal to or greater than its carrying amount. वो ज्यादा हो सकता है residual value उसके carrying amount से. Carrying amount is the amount at which the asset is placed in the balance sheet. If it exceeds then depreciation charge of the asset is zero, and zero until and unless its residual value decreases to an amount. तब तक depreciation charge करते रहेंगे जब तक उसका residual value उसके carrying amount के बराबर या उससे कम नहीं हो जाता. Next is depreciation of an asset begins when it is available for use. So हम depreciation कब start कर देते हैं? हम depreciation charge करना तब start कर देते हैं when the asset is available for use. It is not कि हमने asset को purchase कर लिया और हमने depreciation लगाना start कर दिया. No. When we have purchased the asset and we have put it into the use, then only we start to charge depreciation. That is when it is in the location and condition necessary for it to be capable of operating. जब हम उसको install कर देते हैं, इस condition में ले आते हैं कि it is capable of operating in a manner intended by management, then only we can charge depreciation of an asset. Okay, आपने एक मशीन खरीदी, उसको आके रख दिया और उसको यूज में नहीं लिया, so you cannot charge the depreciation. But आपने मशीन खरीदी, उसके बाद आपने एक हफ्ते बाद उसको इंस्टॉल करा और उसको यूज किया, then only you can charge the depreciation. Depreciation of an asset ceases at the earlier of the date that the asset is retired from active use and is held for disposal, and the date that the asset is de-recognized. So जो भी पहले होता है, या तो वो asset retire हो जाएगा active use से और उसको disposal के लिए रख दिया जाएगा, या फिर उसको de-recognize कर दिया जाएगा. जो भी पहले होता है उस टाइम पर depreciation cease हो जाती है. Therefore, depreciation does not cease when the asset becomes idle or is retired from active use unless the asset is fully depreciated. जब तक वो fully depreciate नहीं होगा, तब तक वो asset idle नहीं होता. Okay. Next is the future economic benefits embodied in an asset are consumed by an enterprise principally through its use. So जो future economic benefit है asset का, वो consume किया जाता है by an enterprise. However, other factors such as technical or commercial obsolescence and wear and tear while an asset remains idle often results in the diminution of the economic benefits that might have obtained from the asset. तो asset का actual economic benefit कैसे मिलता है एक owner को by through its use. लेकिन और जो factors है जिसकी वजह से उसकी value कम हो रही है, that is these are basically asset को idle छोड़ दिया या फिर wear and tear हो गया या फिर उसकी टेक्नोलॉजी पुरानी हो गई, तो उस केस में we cannot do anything. Consequently, all the following factors are considered in determining the useful life of an asset. तो जब हम लाइफ कैलकुलेट करते हैं एक एसेट की, तो उसमें क्या क्या चीजें कंसिडर करते हैं? what do all points do we consider? First is assessed by reference आउटपुट ऑफ द एसेट. हम ये देख रहे हैं एक्सपेक्टेड यूसेज कितना होगा इस पर्टिकुलर एसेट का. अब वो यूसेज कैसे असेस किया जाता है? वो यूसेज असेस किया जाता है बाय द रेफरेंस टू द एक्सपेक्टेड कैपेसिटी और फिजिकल आउटपुट ऑफ द एसेट. सेकंड इज एक्सपेक्टेड physical wear and tear, which depends on operational factors such as number of shifts for which the asset is to be used and the repair and maintenance program and the care and maintenance of the asset while idle. So second factor which is considered while determining the useful life of an asset, is the expected physical wear and tear, and wear and tear is directly proportionate to the use. कितनी shifts में वो use हो रहा है, how it is being handled, उस पर depend करेगा उसमें कितना wear and tear हो रहा है. ठीक है, उसकी रिपेयर एंड मेंटेनेंस का प्रोग्राम कैसे है, उसकी केयर कैसे की जा रही है, उसको कितने टाइम के लिए आइडल छोड़ा जा रहा है, कितने टाइम के लिए उस पर वर्किंग हो रही है, दैट the wear and tear depends on all these factors. Third factor which is considered in determining the useful life of asset is technical or commercial obsolescence arising from the changes or improvement in production. So there can be the cases when the technology becomes obsolete because new technology has entered the market. So it depends on this technical and commercial obsolescence arising from changes or improvement in production or from changes in the market demand for the product or service output of the asset. So expected future reductions in the selling price of an item that was produced using an asset would indicate the expectation of technical or commercial obsolescence of the asset. Next point, legal or similar limits on the use of the asset, such as expiry dates of related leases. So the legal issues or the limits on the use of the assets are also important, such as if the asset is taken on lease. So the expiry date of the related lease is also considered while ascertaining the useful life of an asset. Next is the useful life of an asset is determined in terms of its expected utility to the enterprise. तो जब हम expected life calculate कर रहे हैं तो हम ये देख रहे हैं कि what is the expected utility of that asset to the enterprise. उस terms में we are deciding the useful life of an asset. The asset management policy of the enterprise may involve the disposal of assets after a specified period or after consumption of specified proportion of the future economic benefits embodied in the asset. So, जो asset management policy है एक enterprise की, it may involve disposal of asset after a certain period of time or after the consumption of a specified proportion of future economic benefits from the asset. Therefore, useful life of an asset may be shorter than its economic life. The estimation of the useful life of the asset is just a matter of judgment based on the experience of enterprise with similar assets. So we cannot accurately estimate the useful life of an asset. It is a matter of judgment, which is based on the experience of the enterprise management, which has the similar assets previously. Next is land and buildings are separable assets and are accounted assets and are separately accounted for, even when they are acquired together. So, with some exceptions, such as quarries and sites used for landfill, land has an unlimited useful life. तो हम कुछ exceptions को छोड़कर हम ये assume करते हैं कि land की जो useful life है, that is unlimited and therefore it is not depreciated. Land को हम depreciate नहीं करते. Buildings have a limited useful life and therefore are depreciable assets. So there is an important point that lands are not depreciated, but buildings are treated as an asset having a limited useful life and therefore they are depreciated. Any increase in the value of the land on which a building stands does not affect the determination of the depreciable amount of the building. So if there is an increase in the value of the land on which there is a building, so it will not affect the depreciable amount of the building. Okay, because we are treating building as a separate asset and land as a separate asset. I hope till here it is clear to everyone. Please let me know in case you have any doubt or any query. Is it clear to everyone? Okay. Okay, next is if the cost of land includes the cost of site dismantlement, removal, and restoration, that portion of land asset is depreciated over a period of benefits obtained by incurring those costs. So अगर कोई भी land की cost है जिसमें साइट डिसमेंटलमेंट या रिमूवल और रिस्टोरेशन इंक्लूड होता है, उस लैंड के पोर्शन को हम डेप्रिशिएट करेंगे ओवर द पीरियड ऑफ बेनिफिट्स ऑब्टेन्ड बाय इंकरिंग दोज कॉस्ट. अगर हमने उस लैंड को डिसमेंटल किया है या उसमें से रिमूवल या रिस्टोरेशन किया है, तो उस पोर्शन ऑफ लैंड को वी विल डेप्रिशिएट ड्यूरिंग ओवर दैट पीरियड फॉर विच वी हैव ऑब्टेन बेनिफिट. जितनी हमने कॉस्ट उसमें लगाई है, जब तक हमने उसका बेनिफिट लिया है उस पीरियड तक हम उसको डेप्रिशिएट करेंगे. In some cases, the land itself may have a limited useful life, in which case it is depreciated in a manner that reflects the benefits to be derived from it. The benefits to be derived from it. Next is the depreciation method used should reflect the pattern in which the future economic benefits of the asset are expected to be consumed by the enterprises. So depreciation method जो भी use होगा, that should reflect the pattern in which future economic benefits of the assets are expected to be consumed. So जिस वे में वो future expected benefits asset से consume करना चाहता है enterprise, उसी pattern के basis पे the depreciation method is chosen and used. Next is the depreciation method applied to an asset should be reviewed at least after every financial year end. So जो भी depreciation method apply किया जा रहा है उसको एक बार at the end of financial year review जरूर करना होता है, and if there has been a significant change in the expected pattern of consumption then of the future economic benefits, then the method should be changed to reflect the change pattern. So जो भी depreciation method हम use कर रहे हैं उसको हम हर financial year के end पे review करेंगे. And if we observe that there is a significant change in the expected pattern of future economic benefits there is a major changes in the expected pattern of consumption of future economic benefits, then the method should be changed and it should be reflected in change to reflect the change pattern, and this change should be accounted for as a change in accounting estimate as per accounting standard 5. We should always disclose that change of method of depreciation. Next is, just give me a minute, please. Okay. So next we have a variety of depreciation methods can be used to allocate the depreciable amount of an asset on a systematic basis over its useful life. So there are a variety of depreciation methods. So as per accounting standard 10, property, plant and equipment, it has the guidelines for 3 accounting depreciation methods, which is straight line method, written down value method, and unit of production method. So there are a variety of account depreciation methods which can be used to allocate the depreciation amount of an asset on a systematic basis over its useful life. These methods include straight line method, diminishing balance method, and units of production method. Straight line method depreciation method results in a constant charge over a life. So what are we doing? If we have charged depreciation of 20,000 in first year, then we'll be charging 20,000 for all the years. it is a straight line method where the constant charge over the constant charge of depreciation is charged over a useful life of the asset. Under diminishing balance method, there is a decreasing charge over the useful life. We keep on decreasing on the basis of last value of the asset. We charge depreciation amount. It will keep on decreasing over the useful life of the asset. Under the unit of production method, the result is a charge based on the expected use or output produced by the asset. So the enterprise selects the method that most closely reflects the pattern of consumption of the future economic benefits embodied in the asset. So whenever the enterprise selects the methods, it closely chooses the method which closely reflects the expected pattern of consumption of future economic benefits. That method is applied consistently from period to period unless there is change in the expected pattern. So the enterprise keeps on applying the same method until and unless there is a need to change the method. And then when there is a change in the method of depreciation, it has to be disclosed. So next we have a depreciation method that is based on revenue that is generated by an activity that includes the use of an asset is not appropriate. The revenue generated by an activity that includes the use of an asset generally reflects factors other than the consumption of the economic benefit of the asset. So here, a depreciation method which is based on the revenue, which is being generated by the activity that includes use of an asset is not appropriate, and the revenue generated by such activity includes the use of an asset generally reflects the factors other than the consumption of the economic benefits of the asset. For example, here, revenue is affected by other inputs and processes, selling activities, and changes in sales volumes and price. So the price component of revenue may be affected by inflation, which has no bearing upon the way in which an asset is consumed. So for inflation, there is no control on the asset. So that is why there are some factors which have no control on on the way in which an asset is consumed. So this is all about the depreciation as per Accounting Standard 10, property, plant and equipment. These are the basic guidelines regarding depreciation. So we have studied what is the meaning of depreciation and various guidelines regarding depreciation, how depreciation method is chosen, and what all depreciation methods are there, how useful life of an asset is decided. All these points we have covered. I hope this is clear to everyone. In case you have any doubt, please let me know. Is there any doubt, anyone? Okay, all right. So let's move on to next topic. Let me present the screen first. Is the screen visible to everyone? Is the screen visible? Okay. So next topic is impairment of assets. So can anybody tell what is impairment of assets? Any idea? What is the meaning of impairment of assets? Okay, I'll explain impairment of assets with an example. So suppose a construction company may face extensive damage and due to its outdoor machinery and equipment due to a natural disaster. Now this will appear on its books as a sudden and large decline in the fair value of these assets to go below their carrying value. And when the carrying value of an asset is below is less than the fair value of the asset, it is known as the impairment of assets. So what is happening here? Whenever the value of an asset, the carrying value, the carrying amount of an asset decreases and becomes less than the fair value of the asset, it means the asset has been impaired. It means the impairment of that particular asset. So so accounting standard 28 impairment of assets deals with the guidelines related to the impairment of assets. That is, the carrying amount of the asset should not be more than the recoverable amount of the assets, and this calculation has to be done at the end of each financial year. It has to be done after each financial year. Carrying amount is the amount at which it is shown in the balance sheet, and recoverable amount is the amount at which it can be sold in the market. Okay. Now the applicability. This standard came into effect as on 1st April 2004, and it is mandatory in nature because of the following reasons. First is because of the following SSEs. First is enterprises whose equity or debts securities are already listed in the stock exchange. It is also applicable to those enterprises who are already in the process of issuing equity or debt securities and to listed in the recognized stock exchange in India as evidenced by board of resolution in this regard. So this standard is applicable and is mandatory for the following two SSEs, that is the enterprise whose equity and debt securities are listed, who are also applicable to those who are in process of issuing equity or debt securities, and to those who listed in a recognized stock exchange in India as evidenced by the board of resolution. Second is any commercial, industrial or business reporting enterprises having a turnover of more than 50 crores in an accounting period. They also have to mandatorily apply this accounting standard of impairment of assets. Now, let us understand the explanation. This standard lays down the procedures that need to be followed when there is a reduction in the value of asset, so as to ensure that the carrying amount of the asset does not exceed the recoverable amount. So impairment of asset means when the value of carrying amount is less than the recoverable amount. So this standard lays down the procedures which need to be followed in that case. When there is a reduction in the value of carrying amount than the recoverable amount, so this standard lays down the procedures which need to be followed in that situation. This standard also specifies the reversal of the impairment losses and the disclosures to be made in respect of the impaired assets at the end of the financial year. So this standard lays down the procedures and guidelines regarding the reversal of the impairment losses and the disclosures which are required to be made in respect of impaired assets at the end of the financial year. This standard is applied on all assets except, so there are a few exceptions on which this standard is not applied. Those are, first is inventories, which is covered in accounting standard 2. Second is assets arising under construction contracts, which are covered in Accounting Standard 7. Third is financial assets, including investments, which are covered in Accounting Standard 13. I would request you all to please go through the accounting standards also. As commerce students, as MCOM students, you should be aware about various accounting standards and Indian accounting standards. Okay. Next is deferred tax assets, which are covered in Accounting Standard 22. And there is a note that carrying amount means the book value of the asset after the depreciation and the any other revaluation done by the enterprises. This I have explained you earlier also, that carrying amount is the value at which the asset is represented in the balance sheet. So this is the book value basically. Recoverable amount is the net selling value or value in which or value in use, whichever is higher. So recoverable amount क्या होता है? It is a net selling value or value in use, whichever is higher. Next, we have indicators. An enterprise should assess at the end of the financial year that whether any asset needs to be impaired. So after every financial year, at the end of the financial year, the enterprise should review, is there any asset which needs to be impaired? If there is any such indication that the assets need to be impaired, then the impairment of asset guidelines are required. And there are few indicators which the enterprise has to take into consideration to assess the impairment. So here some indications are given through which the enterprise can can decide whether there is any impairment of assets or not. So first is external indicators. External indicators include, these are basically the points by considering these are the points after which the enterprise can decide whether their assets have to be impaired or not. So there are some external indicators and internal indicators. So external indicators include the change in technology leading to the decline in value of asset. The technology has been upgraded. Increased market interest rate. The market interest rate has been increased. There is a restriction on the use of assets due to some legal provisions or the legal matters. The carrying amount of the asset of the reporting enterprise is more than its market capitalization. So these are the external indicators which are not in control of the organization. These are the fact indicators due to external forces. That is why they are called external indicators. Now, internal indicators are physical damage to the asset due to some mishappening or some event. Then the concrete evidence from the internal reports about the poor performance of the asset. The asset is like that it is not able to perform in a efficient manner, or discontinuity of operations or plan of restructuring. So there can be a reason, there can be a problem in continuing the operations, or there can be a proposal of restructuring. So these are the internal factors. Next, we have measurement of recoverable amount. So as defined earlier, recoverable amount of asset is higher or market value, higher of market value or value in use. It is the higher of the two. In case the selling price is undeterminable, then the value in use must be taken. Now, यहाँ पे हम बार बार बोल रहे हैं जो recoverable amount है, वो या तो asset की market value या उसकी value in use, उन दोनों में से जो higher है वो है. But there can be cases where we cannot estimate the selling price, where we cannot determine the selling price of the asset. So in those cases, we will take the recoverable amount as the value in use. So as per as per Institute of Chartered Accountant of India, recoverable amount is determined for an individual asset unless the asset does not generate cash inflows from continuing use that are largely independent of those from other assets or group of assets. So as per ICAI, recoverable amount is determined for an individual asset unless the asset is not generating any cash inflows from continue when we continue to use it, which is largely independent of those from other asset groups. So if in this case, recoverable amount is determined for the cash generating unit to which the asset belongs. Unless there are two conditions, the asset's net selling price is higher than its carrying amount. एसेट का जो नेट सेलिंग प्राइस है वो हायर है, वो ज्यादा है उसके कैरिंग अमाउंट से, और एसेट की जो वैल्यू इन यूज है दैट कैन बी एस्टिमेटेड टू बी क्लोज टू इट्स नेट सेलिंग प्राइस एंड नेट सेलिंग प्राइस कैन बी डिटरमिन्ड. Now there is a note. An impairment loss is the amount when the carrying amount of the asset increases the recoverable amount of the asset. Okay. Next is cash flow projections. Cash flow projections should be based on the recent budgets or forecast and should be for a maximum of 5 years. So, जो cash flow projections होते हैं, they are based on recent budgets and forecast of it should be for a maximum of 5 years. The management should take reasonable and supportable assumptions for making the cash flows. So, when the cash flow projections are done, it includes the two following points. First is the net cash flow from the continuing use of assets. Second is the net cash flow to be received at the end of the sale of an asset. That is the scrap value, which is received at the end of the sale of the asset. Now we have recognition and measurement of impairment loss. If the recoverable amount of the asset is more than the carrying amount, then the difference amount must be ignored. But if the recoverable amount of an asset is less than the carrying amount, then the difference termed is an impairment loss. When we are saying कि जो book value है asset की वो ज़्यादा है, it is 1 lakh, and the recoverable amount which we are getting of an asset is 80,000. So 20,000 is our impairment loss, and it should be written off immediately and should be treated as an expense to profit and loss account. It should be written off and it should be treated to profit and loss account as an expense. But if the case is different, if the carrying amount is more than if the recoverable amount of the asset is more than the carrying amount, then that difference is ignored. I hope this is clear to everyone. How do we recognize and measure the impairment loss? Okay. Okay, next is cash generating unit. A cash generating unit is the smallest identifiable group of assets that generates cash inflows from continuing use that are largely independent of the cash inflows from other assets or group of assets. So जो cash generating unit होती है वो क्या होता है? It is the smallest identifiable group of assets which is generating cash inflows from the continuous use of that group of assets. The carrying amount of cash generating unit should not be reduced below the highest of a net selling price and value in use. तो जो carrying amount है इस cash generating unit का, it should not be reduced below the highest of the two, that is the net selling price and the value in use. Next, we have reversal of impairment loss. An enterprise at the end of each financial year should review whether the previously recognized impairment loss continue to exist or whether it has been decreased. The enterprise must access the various external and internal indicators. We have read about both the indicators as to access the recoverable amount of the asset. So at the end of each financial year, the enterprise should review whether there is any impairment loss or previously, or is there any impairment loss which continue to exist, or whether it has been decreased. It should also assess all the external and internal indicators to access the recoverable amount of the asset. If the recoverable amount of the asset is more than the carrying amount, then the impairment loss has to be reversed and it has to be treated as income in the books of account. So now we are not having, when the recoverable amount is more than the carrying amount, the market value of an asset is more than the book value. So in that case, the impairment loss has to be reversed and it has to be treated as income in the books of accounts, because अब 80,000 बुक वैल्यू है और 1 लाख रुपीस हमें रिकवरेबल अमाउंट मिल रहा है, तो वी हैव अ प्रॉफिट ऑफ 20,000 which will be treating as income in our books of accounts, and it is also known as the reversal of impairment loss. So the reversal of impairment loss previously recognized for a cash generating unit has to be allocated first to the assets and then the goodwill. उसको हम सबसे पहले assets को allocate करेंगे और उसके बाद हम उसमें उसको goodwill दिखाएंगे. Impairment loss for goodwill should also be reversed if it is proof that the impairment was caused by external effects. So I have told you earlier, there are certain factors that are external and certain factors that are internal. If the impairment is caused due to external factors and now there is a reversal of impairment loss, then it can be reversed for the in the case of goodwill also. Okay. Next, we have disclosures. The following disclosures are required in the financial statement. Impairment loss recognized and reversed for each class of asset. When there is impairment loss which is recognized and reversed, it should be disclosed. Amount of impairment loss set off against revaluation reserve and amount of reversal of impairment loss credit to revaluation reserve segment reporting as per accounting standard 17. So this has also been disclosed. Calculation of revaluation amount of each class of assets, assumptions used in calculation of recoverable amount, events that lead to impairment of assets, and description of cash generating units. So all these points are very important and should be disclosed in the financial statements of an enterprise. So this is all about impairment of assets. Is there any doubt, anyone? Please let me know. Have you understood the whole concept of impairment of assets? Okay. So I can see few gestures in the meeting, which shows that you have understood. Great. So what we have done, so we have discussed about AS 28, that is impairment of assets. We discussed about the application of AS 28. We discussed about the explanations and guidelines of AS 28, indicators, external and internal indicators, which are taken into consideration to assess the impairment of assets. Then we studied about the measurement of recoverable amount. How do we measure that? Then we studied about cash flow projections. Then we studied about recognition and measurement of impairment loss. How do we recognize and measure the impairment loss? Then we studied about cash generating units, and then the reversal of impairment loss, and lastly, the disclosures. So it is very detailed explanation of impairment of assets. I don't think you need any more information after this. Okay, I'm also sharing this file in the chat so that you can go through it later. Just give me a minute. I'm not able to attach. I don't know why. I'm not able to attach the files. Okay, I'll see what I can do later. There's no option of attaching the files now. Earlier it was showing. Okay, I'll see later what I can do. How can I share? Okay, I'll try to share in the chat later. Okay, so next, let's go to the next topic. Just give me a minute, please. Okay, I hope you can see the screen. Is the screen visible, everyone? Is the screen visible to you? Is the screen visible, everyone? Can you please answer? Let me know.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So let's start. Next topic is liability. So what is a liability? Anyone can answer? What is a liability? Can I have the answers, please? It would be great if you can unmute and answer. What is a liability? Okay. So liability is a term in accounting that is used to describe any kind of financial obligation that shows that a business has to pay at the end of an accounting period to a person or a business. So it is basically a financial obligation uh, that a business has to pay a certain consideration or a certain amount at the end of an accounting period to a certain person or a business. Liabilities are settled by transferring economic benefits such as money, goods, or services. So when we say about the term liability, there is something which we have not done as our responsibility. So liabilities are no are said to be settled when the transfer as per the contract, transfer of economic benefits in a way of money, goods or services is complete as per the contract, then the liability is settled. Liabilities are recorded on the right-hand side of the balance sheet, which includes different types of loans, creditors, lenders, and suppliers. And liabilities can be of short-term, long-term. Short-term liabilities are due within an accounting period that is enough for a period of 1 year, that is 12 months. And long-term liabilities becomes due after the duration of more than 12 months or 1 year. Now, various types of liabilities. So, main three categories of liabilities are current liabilities, non-current liabilities, and contingent liabilities. So, let us understand about current liabilities first. So, current liabilities are those liabilities that are due and need to be paid within an accounting period, which is usually for a year or for 12 months. Current liabilities are also known as short-term liabilities due to a relatively short turnaround time. तो जो करंट लाइबिलिटीज होती हैं वो लाइबिलिटीज होती हैं जो जिनका जो ड्यू पीरियड होता है दैट इज which are due or which are need to be paid within one accounting period, जिनको हम 1 year में पे करते हैं, उनका जो ड्यू पीरियड है दैट इज विद इन 1 year, and they are also known as short term liabilities. They are closely need to be monitored by the management of a company, as a company needs to have sufficient liquidity in the form of current assets in order to pay off current liabilities. Current liabilities have a direct impact on the working capital. What is working capital? Working capital is current assets. It is the difference between the current assets and the current liabilities. And current liabilities have a direct impact on the working capital. So if we have more and more of current liabilities, that will reduce our working capital and also will impact the liquidity of our business. Some examples of current liabilities are interest payable, accounts payable, short-term loans, accrued expenses, bank overdraft, etc. So these are the few examples of current liabilities. Now, non-current liabilities. Non-current liabilities are known as long-term liabilities or are long-term financial obligations that are due in over a year's time. Long-term liability play an important role in the long-term financing of the business. These liabilities help businesses acquire capital assets by providing the required capital. Businesses can also invest in new capital projects using the funds obtained from long-term liabilities or debts. So जो long-term liabilities हैं और या फिर हम बोलते हैं non-current liabilities, these are the financial obligations that are due after 1 year's time, after 1 year of time. They are very important in the long-term financing of the business, and they help business acquire capital assets by providing the required capital. They can also invest in new capital projects using the funds obtained from long-term debts or liabilities. Long-term liabilities are an important indicator of the solvency of the business, because if a company is unable to pay off long-term liabilities as and when they become due, it indicates there is some solvency issue with the business, which shows crisis within the business. So when a business is not able to pay its long-term liabilities, it is an indicator of weak solvency of the business. Investors always look at the long-term liabilities of the business before investing, because that shows how solvent the business is. So some examples of long-term liabilities are deferred tax liabilities, bonds payable, capital leases, debentures, etc. Third, we have contingent liabilities. Contingent liabilities are a special type of liability that may occur during the course of a business depending on the outcome of an event that may take place in future. So let me give you an example of contingent liability. Suppose there is a lawsuit and we don't know whether we'll win or we'll lose that lawsuit. So in case in future we loses that case, so it is a kind of contingent liability in which we are not sure whether we'll lose or we'll win the case. But in case we lose, there will be a liability of a certain amount. So that is an example of contingent liability. In accounting standards, contingent liabilities are recorded as potential or probable liabilities only if they have a 50% chance of occurring and when the amount of liability can be estimated properly. So in accounting standards, contingent liability is recorded only when the probable liability only when there is a 50% chance of occurring that liability and when the amount of liability can be estimated properly. Now, there are few examples of contingent liabilities, lawsuits, product warranties, etc. Now, the measurement and valuation of current liabilities. Like assets, liabilities are originally measured and recorded according to the cost principles. So we, like assets, we record on the cost. We also record our liabilities on the basis of cost principle. And that is why, that is when incurred, the liability is measured and recorded at the current market value of the asset or service received. Because current liabilities are payable in a relatively short period of time, they are recorded at face value, and this is the amount of cash needed to discharge the principal of the liability. Current liabilities are due in short period of time, and that is why they are recorded at their fair value. And this is the amount of cash needed to discharge the principal of the liability. Next, no recognition is given to the fact that the present value of these future cash outlays is less, and the present value is related to the idea of the time value of money. Essentially, the time value of money means that cash received or paid in the future is worth less than the same amount of cash received or paid today. So I hope you all have studied about the time value of money. What does it say? It says that the cash received or paid in the future has less value than the same amount of cash received or paid today. This is because cash in hand today can be invested, and thus we can grow that cash to have a greater future amount. Therefore, the value of the liability at the time incurred is actually less than the cash required to be paid in the future because of the time value of money. In connection with current liabilities, the difference between the value today and future cash outlays is not material due to the short time span between the time the liability is incurred and when it is paid. So when I'm talking about the concept of time value of money, it is for the long-term liabilities, not for the current liabilities, because for current liabilities, the time period is generally of 1 year or 12 months, short time period, when between the liability between there is a less time between the liability is when the liability is incurred and when it is paid. Current liabilities therefore are shown at the amount of the future principal payment. However, present value concepts are applied to long-term liabilities, liabilities with no stated interest, and liabilities with a stated interest rate that are materially different from the market rate for similar transactions. So this was all about the liabilities part. I hope this is clear to everyone. Is there any doubt? So we have studied about what is liability, types of liabilities, which are of three types: current, non-current, and contingent. Then we read various examples of all types of liabilities. Then we read about the measurement and valuation of current liabilities. So is there any doubt, anyone? Is there any doubt? Any query? Okay. All right. So let's take a break of 5 minutes. Okay. And then we'll do the next topic. We'll discuss the next topic. Is that okay, everyone?